What's going on, guys? Aaron from Top Tier Gaming here, and today I am coming at you with an updated Madolche list, which is super exciting because this deck just got awesome support in Power of the Elements. I haven't really had time to update the deck in recent times because we had many regionals and along with other things going on. However, here we are with the updated list, and it's a super awesome deck that I've been testing around with, and I'm really liking how it's playing even post Power of the Elements. The new support for this deck really helped patch a lot of its weaknesses and gave it a lot more strengths than it had previously, so I am super excited to showcase this deck today. However, before we do, I do want to let you guys know, Discord link down below along with all of our other social media links if you want to follow the channel more closely. Also, recently we just hit 10,000 subscribers, so huge thanks to you guys and all the support. It really means a lot. And now we have to come up with a new goal, so I'm thinking the next milestone we're gonna say is 20,000 subscribers. I think that's fair enough. So yeah, now we're on the road to 20,000 subscribers, so if you do enjoy this Yu-Gi-Oh content, you like what you see here, feel free to like and subscribe. It really helps me out in what I do here on the channel. But without further ado, let's hop into this Madolche deck profile. Alright, so starting off, we're gonna start off with our starters. We have the three Madolche Madolche, and this is one of your most impactful starters because she is not only full combo with like any of your other starters, but she is also full combo plus a body, so you really want to see this card. She's just a Stratos for the deck, and one of the coolest things about her is she can actually search herself, which can actually be very relevant if you open the 2-card combo with Salon. 3 Madolche Angeli, and this is my favorite starter in the deck, and if you've seen any of my past Madolche deck lists, essentially the reason is because she doesn't care about the status of your graveyard. One of the biggest problems I had with Madolche before Power of the Elements was the fact that some of the starters weren't starters if your graveyard had monsters or if they didn't have monsters, and that made it sort of weird to start playing despite the fact that you have 9 1-card starters, and that was really frustrating. But Angeli doesn't care about how many monsters are in your graveyard. She is just going to be full combo regardless. Honestly, one of the best things about Angeli is the fact that the monsters she brings out can't be destroyed by battle, which means you can set up a near invincible hoot cake on your opponent's turn, and then it will more than likely survive, allowing you to go to the next turn and use the massive amounts of follow-up that Madolche naturally creates. 3 Madolche Petincessor. This is probably like the most impactful starter Madolche has. It's just such a powerful card, being able to just special summon for free and then special summon a Madolche monster from deck, but there are some severe downsides to this card that have now been patched a little bit more with their recent support, but it still exists. So essentially you can only special summon this card from your hand for free if you have no monsters in your graveyard. Which means if you've used like a hand trap, you can't special summon this from your hand, which has always presented sort of a small inconvenience. Another downside she has is that she locks you into Madolche monsters, which isn't really going to matter most of the time, but it's important to note that if you use her effect, you can't go into things like Zeus or really powerful extra deck monsters that aren't Madolche. So she makes the deck very hard locked, but it's usually fine because the Madolche monsters in your extra deck are very powerful. Lastly, we have the 1 Puddingcess. This is required for your Petincessor combo because Petincessor makes Puddingcess level 4. You can overlay for a rank 4 and then overlay into Chocolate and go full combo from there. So technically Puddingcess is a brick, but she is a necessary requirement of the deck, and you just have to play 1 for your Petincessor full combo. 2 Madolche Hoot Cake, and this is one of the most important cards in the Madolche engine because it is a beast, which is super relevant for Gelato. Essentially, this is like a free special summon for a Madolche monster from your deck, which is super good because it being beast means you can special Gelato and then search a Madolche spell or trap. There is reason to potentially play 3 of this now after the new support. I've considered it, I've tested around with it a bit. I'm still on 2 because I want to play essentially more go second cards and more flex spots, but I do think 3 of this could be more relevant in the future and potentially even the way to go, but I'm still testing 2 and I'm liking it at 2 right now. Then we have 2 Madolche Gelato. This is the card you really don't want to see in your opening hand. However, it's actually gotten a lot better if you do, thanks to, again, the support from Power of the Elements. Gelato is actually one of the more important cards in the deck, despite not wanting to draw him, because he allows you to get easy access to your Madolche spells and traps, which is huge because that is where the deck will find most of its follow-up and its interrupt, so you really want to make sure you special summon 2 of these on your first turn if you're going for full combo, and then set up a decent amount of interruptions with your Madolche engine for your opponent's turn. Alright, so that rounds off the Madolche monsters at 14, which is more than enough. Again, I think there is room to play a 3rd Hoot Cake, but I think in this list I'm completely fine with 2. Now, for one of the most important parts of the deck, it is the support it got from Power of the Elements. So, showing it off, we of course have the 3 Vernusylph of the Flourishing Hills. I think a lot of you probably already caught on to this when I was talking about support for Power of the Elements, but if you did not, essentially the Vernusylph monsters are a brand new set of monsters that work with fairies and earth monsters, and the Madolches happen to be both fairy and earth. Now, Vernusylph of the Flourishing Hills is arguably one of the best ones because it allows you to search the other Vernusylph you run. All the Vernusylphs essentially have the effect that you can discard themselves and a monster, or a Vernusylph card, but in this case, in Madolche, you will only be discarding monsters. And then you can use their effect, which they're listed like this one searches a Vernusylph card, and then like the other one sends an earth monster from your deck to the graveyard. But then they all have the additional effect that you can special summon an earth monster from your graveyard. This is super huge for Madolche because it allows you to special summon additional starters from your hand. Like say you normal summon Madolche Madolche and she gets Veilered. Then you can discard like the Vernusylph Flourishing Hills and Angeli and allow yourself to keep playing, which is super good. It means like these essentially work as extenders, but they also allow your starters to like always be starters. Or if you've used a hand trap, right? Let's say you've used like an Ash Blossom if you're running it, then you can discard on your turn the Vernusylph and the Petincessor, especially the Petincessor from your graveyard, and still full combo. And that is very good, because even if you have a monster in your graveyard, now Petincessor is a starter, which is huge for the deck. However, not only that, say you have 0 monsters in your graveyard and you open a monster like Hoot Cake, you can discard the Flourishing Hills and the Hoot Cake to add a Vernusylph card from your deck to your hand, and then special the Hoot Cake, and now you have a Vernusylph monster in your graveyard to banish for the Hoot Cake. And that means essentially the problem that you see in a lot of my old deck profiles, and I've probably said it 100 times in my old Madolche deck profiles, is the problem with Madolche is that your starters aren't always starters. And the Vernusylph monsters have now essentially fixed that, and it means you don't have to run a certain other card in your deck, which I really like. So yeah, the 3 Flourishing Hills, and then the 2 Awakening Forests. I played this ratio because like you are fine with like 5 Vernusylph monsters. I've been testing around with 4, I've been testing around with 5. I think I prefer 5. Awakening Forests always does something, but if you don't have him in deck, Flourishing Hills does nothing, which is why I wanted to play like more than one of this. But I think you could cut it down to 1 potentially, but then you're running less than 5 Vernusylphs, and I wanted to be at 5. After Darkwing Blast, which is the next set after Power of the Elements, we get a new Vernusylph. I'm calling him the Duck. I actually don't remember his name, but the Duck is insane for this deck because it essentially does what all the Vernusylphs do, except it adds any Earth Fairy monster from your deck to your hand. Namely, that could be the Madolche Angeli, and then the Vernusylph package is actually a starter. Of course, we won't have that until Darkwing Blast, but I think that will be a huge boost for Vernusylph Madolche. And yeah, this package is absolutely insane. It means you don't have to play Small World, which I'll explain, I guess, a little more when I get to the spells. Yeah, the Vernusylphs essentially do exactly what you wanted them to do, and after Darkwing Blast, they only get even better. So we are on 5 Vernusylph monsters. For your engine spells, I've opted to play 1 Madolche Salon and 1 Madolche Chateau. So I'm opting out of Ticket in this list. Ticket is a fantastic card, but the problem with Madolche spells is they have a very high tendency to brick, and I wanted to minimize them as much as possible. You don't need Ticket, usually it's a win more and it's nice for follow-up, but the only ones you actually need for combo are Salon and Chateau. And Chateau in this list is exponentially more amazing than it has been in past lists, because without the Vernusylphs, you had to play your hand trap lineup very weird, and you couldn't play really good hand traps because of Petincessor. But now with the Vernusylphs, you can play regular hand traps, which means you have Glass Souffle Chateau combo with your hand traps a lot more often. And that is like one of the strongest things about Madolche, was always that combo, but you could never really play it optimally. But now, Chateau is just infinitely better than it used to be, and it's such a fantastic card. It always was, and it's mandatory, but now it's just really, really good with your other hand traps. 2 Madolche Promenade. This is sort of one of the biggest payoffs for the Madolche engine, is being able to set this up on your first turn. This card is so good because it means you don't lose to board breakers like Dark Ruler No More, because this is essentially like a hot red. You target a face-up card your opponent controls, target a Madolche monster on your field or in your graveyard, and then you negate their card, which means you know it can target spells and traps, and then you add that Madolche monster you targeted back to hand. So this thing is follow-up and a negate. It has follow-up again in graveyard. Being able to attach Pudding Cess from anywhere like you control is pretty good. On an Xyz monster, it means like if you had like a Glass Souffle that didn't get to go full combo, you can try to do it next turn. But also with Salon, Promenade replaces itself, which is also fantastic, which is why you have to play 2 of it in my opinion. This card is bonkers. It is one of the biggest payoffs for the Madolche engine by far, maybe besides Glass Souffle. 3, Pot of Prosperity. Now, this card is fantastic in this deck because there are just 6 flex spots in your extra deck, and the Madolche engine does not draw within its engine. And that means Prosperity finds an amazing home in this deck, being able to find either your starters or your Vernusylphs to extend, or just like additional good cards. Prosperity really helps the consistency of this deck by a lot. Now, Prosperity is a very expensive card, so if you don't have access to this card, you can replace it with Hand Traps or maybe Extravagance, but you will have to change your extra deck drastically if you want to play Extravagance. I highly recommend playing Prosperity because in this deck, it is absolutely insane. 2, Triple Tactics Talent. This card is just a fantastic flex spot in this current format. And then we have 1, Called by the Grave. These are really good for sort of playing around hand traps, right? Like Called by is obviously one of the most insane cards ever. And then Tactics can be used like if they ash you or Valor you at a spot that didn't matter too much, you can look at their hand and like take a Nibiru, which is super good, but this is also doubling as like a good go second card. I think it's really good in Madolche, especially now. Like before, it was really weird because you would get interrupted and then you essentially had to draw Salon to keep extending, or maybe Small World. But now with Triple Tactics Talents, you can draw into a Vernusylph and like have any other starter that can now be an extender, and I think Tactics just got a lot stronger in the deck because of it. Of course, Tactics' best effect, in my opinion, for this deck usually is to look at your opponent's hand, but now I think the draw effect is a lot more relevant. Also, speaking of, now that I'm thinking about it, as far as budget options for Prosperity, once again, I think Small World could be an excellent budget option, but just remember you will have to run a Pankratops in your deck, so keep that in mind. But yeah, we are running the 2 Triple Tactics Talents and the 1 Called by the Grave. Alright, on to the hand traps, and I feel like this is the section of this deck that changed the most after Power of the Elements, at least in my list, because before, I was very, very against running the standard like low impact but always good hand traps like Ash Blossom, like Effect Veiler. Cards like those were really weird in this deck because of Petting Cessor, and you could just turn off your only 1 card starter by using a hand trap, which sort of meant you had to run very awkward hand traps and none that touched the graveyard. But now, because of the Vernusylphs, I feel like you can run the low impact hand traps that are actually very, very good. Then you can abuse them with Glass Souffle, which I think is absolutely insane. So going through the hand traps here, I have 2 Ash Blossom, which I'm running 2 of her essentially because with Glass Souffle especially, I only want to draw 1 of like very hard once per turn hand traps. So I've opted for 2 Ash Blossom, who's just sort of like okay this format. She's great against like starter, but she finds herself in like a lot of hands being very, very weak. Then we have 2 Ghost Ogre, which I think is one of like the best hand traps this format. It just stops Gigantic very hard, and it's very good versus Tier Element in certain situations. It can destroy the field spell, it can destroy Dragos Tapelia, and it can destroy Time Thief Redoer, all very good hits for stopping your opponent's interrupts. Ghost Ogre, again, very good versus the Brave Engine. And then the last Ghost Girl in the deck is 1 Ghost Bell, and the reason we're running 1 Ghost Bell and 2 of the other Ghost Girl hand traps is because essentially, with Awakening Forests, you can finish your combo by using this, dumping Ghost Bell from your deck to your grave, and then Glass Souffle plus Chateau can actually add Ghost Bell from your graveyard to your hand. What essentially this means is, with the Madolche engine now, the payoff used to just be Glass Souffle and Promenade plus follow-up, but now with the Vernusylph and Madolche stuff, you can go for your Glass Souffle, Promenade, and get Ghost Bell, which means your engine payoff is just an additional interrupt, which I really like. Ghost Bell is also just a fantastic card this format, being able to stop Tier Element effects, Called by the Grave, DD Crow, which is really annoying, and then also it can stop Totally Awesome, which is huge, and that is it for the Ghost Girl hand traps. Then we have the part where I mentioned abusing hand traps with Glass Souffle. I have 3 Effect Veiler, which is not once per turn, which is huge. And then I have 3 DD Crow, which is also not once per turn, which is amazing. So with these 6 hand traps, they aren't once per turn, which means you can like use Effect Veiler, and then later in that turn use Glass Souffle to shuffle cards in graveyard, add Effect Veiler back to your hand, and use the same Effect Veiler again, which is why non-once per turn hand traps are very good. Now, something about this hand trap lineup you'll notice is I'm not running Infinite Impermanence, and I'm running Effect Veiler over Imperm. The reasoning for that is, even though Imperm is a much better card than Effect Veiler, With Glass Souffle, it is much better to add this card from your graveyard to your hand. This also is a hand trap you can put in grave for Hoot Cake, but more importantly, the Vernusylphs require that you discard a monster. So if your hand going first doesn't have anything but like a starter and an Imperm rather than Effect Veiler, you might not be able to use your Vernusylph as an extender. For that reason, I've sort of decided to play Effect Veiler over Imperm, despite Imperm being the better card. And I think DD Crow's self-explanatory. It's just an amazing card. This format hits a lot of different decks, specifically like Tier Elements, which you already have a decent matchup into going first, but this helps your going second against them quite a bit. So that will be 11 hand traps and wraps up the 40 card main deck. On to the extra deck, we have the 3 Madolche Teacher, good old Glass Souffle. She's definitely one of the best Madolche Exceeds in the deck. She's just like your main first turn interrupt, being like a double DD Crow, which is amazing in the Tier Element matchup and can be good versus Sprite, although much better against Tier Element. Against graveyard decks, she is so phenomenal, but against non-graveyard decks, you end up using her to shuffle your own things, which could be hand traps like Effect Veiler, to stop more of the standard decks like Sprite, so you can recycle Ghost Ogre and DD Crow and Veiler. She's just one of the main cards of the deck, and she's the only one I opt to play at 3 because she is that important. 2, Queen Tiramisu. She is sort of the board breaker for Madolche. She was so ahead of her time. Honestly, a fantastic board breaker, and you can use multiple of her in a turn. And she's more often than not your go second play. 2, Chocolate a la Mode, which is part of your main Madolche combo, but also can help you rank up into Zeus, which is very nice. Lastly, we have 2, Fresh Sistart. She's usually what you use to finish your end board and allow you to proc Glass Souffle on your own turn by sending more Madolche monsters to graveyard. She's a phenomenal card, but you really only need one. The second one ends up being banished off Prosperity for me a lot. And that is 9 Madolche extra deck monsters, which means we have exactly 6 flex spots, as I sort of mentioned in the Prosperity section of this video. I choose to run a Trap Tricks Rafflesia. That is because I normally side 1 Gravedigger for going first, which can assist you in, playing around hand traps going first. I don't know if I want to side it in this list, and if you're not running Gravedigger, you don't have to play Rafflesia at all, but this could be a Baguska if you decide to go that route, or maybe even a Abyss Dweller, however you want to play it. 1 Gaia Dragon and 1 Zeus. You can actually get to 6 material Zeus in this deck, which is pretty funny. You can go in a Tiramisu, use Promenade Effect and Grave to attach a Madolche under her, and then you can overlay for Chocolate, overlay for Gaia Dragon and attack, and then overlay Zeus, and you have 6 materials, which is hilarious. Usually you'll end up with a 4 send Zeus, 4 material Zeus I mean, which is pretty good. It means 2 sends, and Zeus ends up being a very powerful card in this deck if you are not locked into Madolche. Lastly, we have the 1 Trouble Sunny, the 1 Omega, and the 1 Fossil Warrior Skull Knight. These were essentially targets for Ultimate Slayer, which I had in the side deck. And if you want to run Ultimate Slayer, these are very good cards because they help you get rid of your opponent's crazy fields. I'm running Fossil Warrior Skull Knight instead of Natisse, and I'm running Omega instead of something like Wind Pegasus, essentially because you can get these out of your graveyard, right? Say you open Ultimate Slayer and Petting Cessor and you have no way to extend if you have a monster in grave, you can send Skull Knight or Omega, and then use their graveyard effect to get them out of the graveyard, and then go Petting Cessor full combo. So that's sort of why I'm playing the Skull Knight and the Omega over something like Wind Pegasus and Natisse. Alright, so that is going to conclude the Madolche deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. Honestly, I think Madolche are in a much better position this format than they were last format. Getting the huge support and power of the elements was a huge boost. However, also the format changing is nice. Glass Souffle was not very good versus Dragon Link or any of the Brave Teleport stuff. It wasn't really good versus Sword Soul. Glass Souffle was good versus Despia, but I think she's much better this format, being able to hit Sprite cards like Ronin Totem and anything in grave they could add back with Elf. And more importantly, being amazing versus Tier Element is a very nice boost to the deck overall, and I think it's in a much better place this format, and also has a very bright future thanks to the Duck coming out in Darkwing Blast. But that is going to be it for this Madolche deck profile. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. This has been Aaron from Top Tier Gaming. Bye, YouTube.